Damn wife, I told you not to call me at work unless it's important. On the other end of the phone, my husband yelled in annoyance, causing me to catch my breath for a moment. Right now, he's on an overnight business trip. He's busy with sales and has repeatedly told me how crucial this job is and to never disturb him. So I wouldn't keep contacting him unless it was something important. To think that the first thing he said after I finally got through to him was this: "I'm so angry I could boil over," being dismissed without even being heard, assuming it's nothing important. "It is important, actually," I replied. "Your mom?" "Shut up. If Mom needed something, she'd contact me directly. If you're the one calling, it can't be that important. It's trivial." I'm hanging up now. This is why women are so. He deliberately interrupted me loudly and hung up the phone, still grumbling. Unknowingly, I exhaled deeply, yet my heart wouldn't settle down. I gripped my phone, took several deep breaths, and finally calmed down a bit. I stared at the email screen for a while, then slowly closed my eyes. I wonder if he's never heard of the phrase, "dead men tell no tales." The email from my brother-in-law unmistakably informed me of my mother-in-law's passing. "My name is Regina. I'm a 32-year-old freelance web designer. I worked hard in my company during my 20s and finally went independent. Now I work from home while living with my husband. My husband's name is Kenneth. We met through a client I was working for at the time. We got along well and eventually, without any issues, started dating and got married. Kenneth was gentle and calm during our dating period, but once we got married, his attitude became increasingly cold. Even when I tried to have a conversation, all he would say was, "I'm tired," and then he'd just blankly watch TV, ignoring me. On his bad days, he would say, "You're lucky working from home at your own pace." At the office, no matter how much I dislike it, I have to talk to bosses and clients. "I envy you." You should at least make some effort in cooking since you have it easy. Indeed, working from home allows me to avoid office politics and work in peace, but it's unstable, as I only get paid based on output. There's always anxiety and pressure. It's tough. The atmosphere between us grew increasingly tense. I was anxious about our future life. There was a time when we even tried to have children. I hoped that having a child might make Kenneth more aware of his role as a father and perhaps mellow him a bit, and I wanted to have children before I got much older. However, that dream never came true. I did get pregnant once. It was a joyous occasion, but before even reaching the 6-month mark, I had a miscarriage. I still can't forget the pain from that time, the guilt of not being able to bear our child, though still a fetus. The loss of a precious life left me with an unbearable sadness. At times like this, I couldn't focus on work and spent every day crying and cooped up. The baby probably thought it was better to die than stay in your uncomfortable belly, my husband said, looking down on me with disdain. Man got to start all over again. What a drag. Seriously, can you even get pregnant still? His words were so lacking in delicacy that they wounded me deeply, shattering my heart even more. What saved me from rock bottom was my mother-in-law. Ever since we got married, I had a good relationship with her. She would come over to our house or exchange messages with me. We shared tips about recipes and cosmetics, maintaining a friendship-like relationship, albeit with some care. When she learned about my miscarriage, she grieved with me as if it were her own sorrow. When my husband blurted out in her presence, "What a defective product. Can't a woman even properly bear a child?" She exploded, grabbed him by the collar and commanded, "Kenneth, what are you saying? Blaming your wife for a miscarriage is unbelievable. Regina did nothing wrong. Sometimes it's just a whim of God, not learning that but only learning twisted character and how to speak nastily. I didn't raise you to be such a son." Seeing her defend me while my heart was being worn down by my husband's attitude somehow lifted my spirits. I felt deep gratitude and affection for the mother-in-law who stood up for me. When we were alone, she shared that she too had experienced a miscarriage before conceiving Kenneth. It had happened before she became pregnant with Kenneth. There was indeed a baby here, and I couldn't bear it. I was so sad and frustrated. I blamed myself back then. Medicine wasn't as advanced, and the causes weren't clear. They even said it might be the mother's fault. I was harshly blamed by my mother-in-law. I really wanted to tell you it's not your fault, while holding my hands. Her words pained me, and my heart felt tightly squeezed. I thought about ending it with the baby. I couldn't bear many times. "Don't say that," I blurted out as she smiled gently. "It's okay. I'm alive now." And after that, I even had 2 more children after Kenneth, so it'll be fine. You'll surely be able to bear your next child. But I know it's hard right now. You can vent to me. We can just chat to distract you. His dad's been gone for a few years, and I have all the time in the world, so call me anytime. Tears welled up in my eyes at her warm, loving words. Before I knew it, I was clinging to my mother-in-law, tears streaming down my face. Since then, my relationship with my mother-in-law deepened, perhaps stronger than even real family. However, my husband remained cold as ever. Even as I recovered and resumed my normal work and household tasks, his indifferent attitude persisted. There were no more abusive words, but no pleasant conversations either. At home, his typical remarks were like commands to a servant. "I'm tired, isn't there any dinner?" Or, after eating, "I have an entertaining meeting the day after tomorrow. Prepare some gifts," without bothering to clear the table. Otherwise, he mostly ignored me, treating me like I was just part of the background. I wonder if there was any point in continuing such a loveless marriage. On the other hand, I continued my relationship with my mother-in-law, exchanging messages and meeting a few times a month for tea or shopping. I was afraid to lose this relationship if I divorced Kenneth. Moreover, the money Kenneth brought home was diminishing despite supposedly earning well in sales. He only provided the bare minimum for living expenses. "You earn too, so this should be enough to live on, right?" He decided unilaterally without leaving room for discussion, almost as if saying, "I'm giving you money, so no complaints." There was no sudden lavish spending or signs of an affair, like lipstick on his shirts or business cards from nightclubs. He just kept saying work was busier with more demanding clients, increasing his business trips and time away from home. It was strange that he didn't suggest divorce despite treating me as if I were hair. As I adjusted to this frugal lifestyle over a few months and continued to work hard, my previous efforts began to be recognized, and more work came my way. Rates from longtime clients increased, and new projects kept coming through referrals. As my workload increased, my job began to take off. Naturally, my earnings increased, and if I kept up this pace, I might manage to save some money, even with the minimal financial support from my husband. One day, though, something happened. "What? Another business trip? You just went last week." I was surprised when my husband, who had just been on a trip a few days ago, said he was leaving again for 3 days and 2 nights. It seemed excessively frequent. While business trips are common in sales, I hadn't heard anything about him changing departments since we got married. Such a sudden, significant change in his environment seemed unnatural. That's what I've been telling you. I have these annoying clients who summon me to the countryside. Unlike you who just clicks around online, I earn my keep on my feet. He snapped at me, then threw an empty suitcase in front of me, signaling me to get ready. Why do I have to endure this? These thoughts crushed my heart as I silently looked down at the suitcase. Without showing any interest in me, my husband carelessly finished his dinner and shower and went to sleep. Even as I approached the bed, he snored loudly, showing no sign of waking. His phone was right in front of me. I could easily peek inside if I used his finger for the fingerprint authentication. But if I found definitive proof, it would certainly lead to divorce. I would have to explain it to my mother-in-law. If I divorced, I doubted we could continue our relationship as before. But maybe if I confided in her, she might scold him, saying it's my son's fault, and we could continue our relationship, not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but just as friends. As I was about to use his finger to unlock his phone, the screen suddenly lit up. A message notification appeared, clearly from a woman, displaying her name. Looking forward to the weekend. Last week I went shopping, so this time let's relax in the hotel and get cozy. Strangely, I felt no anger. Rather, I was almost happy that I had evidence to get a divorce from my husband. Seeing my chance as he slept deeply from drinking, I unlocked his phone and launched the messaging app. I quickly took a screenshot with my phone and scrolled slowly. I recorded a video of all their messages since the start of their affair. There were photos shot on the bed, and I struggled to steady my trembling hands. Then I verified whether his overnight stays were for business or to meet this woman. It turned out not all were lies. Occasionally, he really was on business trips. Gathering evidence was eerily easy, as if he had no intention of hiding his affair, which made my head spin. Even the next morning, he seemed to notice nothing unusual. He sat down for breakfast as usual, complained about the seasoning, belittled my work, and grumbled about how hard his life was. As I watched his back while he left through the front door, my heart remained strangely calm. I wondered if I should look for a lawyer. Perhaps because I said nothing, my husband seemed in a slightly better mood that weekend. He unusually left with just, "I'll be back," heading out on what was supposed to be a business trip, but was actually an affair getaway. As I was tidying up the house and considering going shopping for dinner, I pondered my next steps. I received an unusual call on my phone. Kenneth has a brother and a sister. The call was from Kenneth's brother. My brother-in-law is married but lives with his parents to save money for a house. "Hello." When I answered the phone, I heard his voice sounding more subdued than when we last met. "Regina, I'm sorry to call out of the blue, but my mother suddenly passed away." "What?" "No, it must be some mistake." I cried out almost like a scream. Images of my mother-in-law, with whom I had spent so much time, flashed through my mind. Her smiling face when we had coffee together, her serious expression when she was giving me advice, and her warm expression when she supported me during my miscarriage. The sudden news of her passing felt like a stab in the heart. It's true. She collapsed suddenly this morning, and we called an ambulance, but she was gone. "I'm sorry, is Kenneth there?" I can't seem to reach him. I hesitated for a moment. I was tempted to spill everything to my brother-in-law right then, but it wasn't the right time. Now was not the moment to tell him. "I'm sorry he's not here. He's on a business trip," I said. "I think it's tough for you, too. Shall I handle it?" "Okay, could you please do that?" "Honestly, I'm overwhelmed with everything that needs to be done." After offering my condolences again and telling him I'd help if needed, I ended the call. Then I immediately tried to contact Kenneth. My heart ached with the pain of losing the mother-in-law I was close to, and I fretted over my husband not answering the phone. After ringing more than 10 times, Kenneth finally picked up, sounding clearly annoyed. "Hello, I'm glad you finally answered," I began. But before I could speak further, Kenneth cut me off. "Huh. What about Mom? Didn't I tell you I'm on a business trip? Don't call me with trivial stuff," he snapped. I was momentarily breathless. He was irritated to be called by his wife during his affair trip. Knowing this only fueled my anger. "Come home right now. This morning your mom." His anger flared as I insisted on speaking, and he yelled, cutting me off. If it was really important, Mom would have contacted me directly. If not, it's nothing serious. "I'm at work. Don't call me," he shut in. With that, Kenneth ranted in a harsh tone and hung up unilaterally. I stood shocked and trembling, holding my phone, confused. He wouldn't even listen. It was about his mother. I tried calling several more times, but either the phone was off or out of service. I felt hopeless. I took a deep breath. "If you really don't want to talk to me that much, then I'll just stop calling," I murmured. It was his own words, after all. He shouldn't have any complaints about it later. Then I left a note on the dining room table that simply read, "I'm going to your parents' house," quickly packed my bags, and left the house. By the time I arrived at my in-laws, it was already evening. In the midst of the chaos, Kenneth's brother and sister greeted me. On the living room table, there was a to-do list left for the family, with papers scattered everywhere. "I'm sorry there's still so much to do. I haven't managed to get everything organized," I confessed. "No, I'm sorry for coming alone at such a time," I apologized. "It's okay, but what about Kenneth? Is he coming later?" They seemed to expect us both, but my brother-in-law looked puzzled seeing me alone. My sister-in-law also seemed surprised, peering outside to see if Kenneth's car was there, which made me feel guilty. I steeled myself and relayed the conversation I had with Kenneth a few hours earlier. After a painfully long silence, my sister-in-law was the first to speak. "I can't believe it. He really said that. What is he thinking?" She seemed to be trying to control her anger, her fists trembling, and her face flushed red. "That jerk. Damn, should I try to contact him right now?" My brother-in-law muttered in a dangerously low voice, looking closely at the memo he was fiddling with. I noticed it listed the funeral home's name and the number of people to call. Next to the word Chief Mourner was Kenneth's name. There, noticing my gaze, my brother-in-law quickly dropped the memo. The funeral home thought Kenneth would be the main organizer. "I'll call them now, right? We need to update them as soon as we know," he declared, immediately contacting the funeral home. I stayed the night there. The next morning, my brother-in-law was busy with paperwork like the death certificate. I reckon relatives who had not been reached the previous day, informing them of my mother-in-law's death. I focused all my energy on preparing for the wake. Despite the sudden notice, many people came to see my mother-in-law. At the wake, every time I had to explain that Kenneth was on an important business trip and couldn't get away, some people were astonished, others angry, and some even tried to contact him on the spot. However, either his phone was off or he was not responding to any calls. After an exhausting night, I collapsed into sleep. The funeral began the next day, and I managed to see my mother-in-law off. But during the final farewell, I couldn't hold back my tears as I remembered her gentle face. I cried openly, hugging my sister-in-law, mourning the loss together. A mother-in-law like this, who is so loved by her daughter-in-law, is rare. "I'm sure Mom was happy to have gotten along with you, Regina," my brother-in-law consoled me. The three of us returned to my in-laws' house, shared memories of my mother-in-law, and shed tears together. There was still no contact from Kenneth in the following days. We managed the funeral expenses and entertained friends of my mother-in-law who visited the house, living through hectic days. Before I knew it, 3 days had passed. Suddenly, the front door of the in-laws' house was violently flung open. The heavy footsteps stomped in, and it was Kenneth who burst into the living room. "As long as you're squatting in someone else's house, shut in. You left everything at home, and just what have you been doing?" Kenneth started yelling the moment he saw me, but then he noticed his brother and sister with raised eyebrows. He seemed to calm down momentarily, looking around the tidy and chair-filled living room, his head tilting in confusion. "What's this? Guests? And where's Mom? I'm thirsty." At his words, my sister-in-law quietly stood up. But quicker than her, his brother rushed up to Kenneth and punched him right in the face. Kenneth screamed as he fell backwards with a loud thud. Mounting him, his brother grabbed Kenneth by the shirt. "Mom's dead. The wake and funeral are already over, and you have the nerve to show up now." The usually quiet and polite brother-in-law spat out his words with fury. As Kenneth seemingly forgets the pain on his cheek, he looked utterly foolish. Gradually, as the meaning of the words sank in, Kenneth's face turned as red with anger as his brother's, and he shouted back, "I didn't hear anything about this." Why didn't anyone tell me something this important? We did. I did and Regina did. Even relatives called you. Crazy. Kenneth choked up, looking away, unable to respond. I don't know when Kenneth had turned his phone back on, but combined, the calls from everyone about my mother-in-law's death must have easily surpassed 50. Pretending he hadn't seen them was hardly an option now. Yet still unwilling to admit his fault, Kenneth glared at me. It's your fault for not getting to the point sooner. If you had told me clearly about Mom, I would have come right back. It's you who didn't even want to listen, right? My sister-in-law's cold voice cut through Kenneth's shouts. Unlike my still trembling brother-in-law, she looked at Kenneth with undisguised contempt. You guys think she would lie about this? That's impossible because I recorded our call that time. Do you want to hear it too? As I showed my phone to him, Kenneth's eyes widened. Indeed, I had set my phone to automatically record all calls. Unlike my online consultations where incoming calls often involved minor amendments and additions that could easily lead to disputes later, this feature useful for tracking assertive salespeople and their affiliations was something I cherished. Naturally, the conversations with Kenneth were also recorded, and I had already let my brother-in-law and sister-in-law listen to these recordings. As my sister-in-law glared at Kenneth with wide eyes, she added, "Kenneth, you're lying. I heard at the company there's no business trip. It seems like you've been continuously on leave." "What? You checked up on me at the company?" Yes, she worked at the same company and, harboring suspicions, had inquired about his department. "Well, of course, I was worried. You're too busy to even come to Mom's funeral. Or is there something you're worried might come out if someone digs too deep?" Silence fell. Then my brother-in-law, looking pale, raised his head and gave Kenneth a severe look. "So, what have you been doing all this time? You took leave," Kenneth brazenly shouted back. "What do you mean, what, work?" "Work? There are entertainments." "I have to attend even if I'm on leave. You wouldn't understand." While Kenneth shouted, I turned on my phone. It contained evidence of his affair I had collected earlier. "It was a trip with your mistress, wasn't it?" I said this as I showed the phone to Kenneth's brother and sister. "What are you talking about? Stop making things up." Ignoring his flustered shouts, I showed them the images of messages exchanged between him and his girlfriend and receipts from a brand shop for gifts he had likely bought her. There were also photos of them arm in arm. Anyone could understand the situation from these images. I could even show the messages they had exchanged right before this trip. "What is this? I can't believe it. You neglected Mom for a trip with this woman? And these messages are so cheesy. It's disgusting." His sister immediately expressed her disgust. His brother, unable to fully grasp the situation, turned a pale face towards Kenneth. "It's not just about the trip, but this is a betrayal to Regina, and spending so much on gifts for her really hits the family finances hard. For his brother, who was actively saving money, the financial issues were particularly pressing. Kenneth had been contributing almost nothing at home, instead spending it on his mistress, which was unforgivable to him. "Wait a minute. What are you looking at?" In a rage, Kenneth snatched the phone from us. After looking through it, he confronted me. "When did you get this? You snooped on my messages with her, huh?" After Kenneth's brother managed to restrain Kenneth from roughly grabbing my clothes, Kenneth, in a fit of irritation, violently threw my phone onto the floor. The loud crash painfully echoed in the tense room. "I didn't want to do this, but you are obviously suspicious. Constantly away on business trips and barely coming home, hardly putting any money into the house. All you ever have for me are words without a shred of compassion. I just knew something was up," I retorted fiercely as I picked up my phone. Then I happened to see messages from her. More evidence just came out easily from the bedroom. "You're terrible at hiding it." I was astounded being on the receiving end of the affair. At that, Kenneth lost it. Shut up. Having a wife and a home, doing well at work and earning money, Women just flock to you. In the world of men, that's also a mark of reputation. Or would you rather have a husband who can't get anywhere, huh? I looked down, not out of hurt, but because I couldn't help but laugh at his ridiculous justification. I managed to compose myself, took a deep breath, and delivered my final words to him. You only get to talk like that when you've actually taken care of your family. You have no right to speak of responsibility. Don't ever come back to our house again. Eventually, soon after, Kenneth was cut ties by both his brother and sister. Mishandling his marriage and indulging in an affair without remorse and showing no compassion towards his deceased mother was enough reason for them to sever ties. I cleared out all of Kenneth's belongings from our home and started enjoying my life alone. And of course, I took proper steps regarding the divorce by consulting with a lawyer. Turns out, the mistress was a woman from a company he did business with, and after his sister identified her from the evidence photos, it was quickly confirmed. Utterly disgusting. This woman is no better. We need to think about who we associate with, his sister said while sharing the mistress's information she found on social media with me. Once the divorce process started, my phone started blowing up with frantic messages from him. Come on, give me a break. After being kicked out by my own family, I had to rent a cheap place. But I can't live like this, Kenneth complained, showing no understanding of his own misdeeds, which left me dumbfounded. I immediately blocked his number. A few days later, he started showing up at my house directly. What are you doing here? I told you never to come back, I said, pushing him away. He smirked unpleasantly and replied, All right, I won't come in. But at least sort out the money thing. The alimony is too high, and I barely have enough to get by. I can't even afford a new suit. This is a big problem for a top salesman like me. Come on, can't you let it slide? He was shamelessly begging for money. You should get supported by the girlfriend you went on trips with. Biting his lip in frustration, Kenneth frowned. She dumped me. She got furious when she found out what happened, and it led to a breakup. Kenneth, once a money source for his girlfriend, had turned into a financial burden, and she dumped him. He had lavished her with expensive brands and luxury trips, and it turned out she was just with him for his money. A shallow woman indeed. Oh, really? But you're such an accomplished person at your company, unlike me, right? If that's the case, you should be able to take care of yourself. Goodbye then, I said, and slammed the door shut. I quickly contacted my lawyer, and soon a restraining order was issued against Kenneth. He had wasted the money he made on his mistress and frivolities, neglecting home responsibilities, and now living at a tiny price. He couldn't even manage basic household tasks. His disheveled appearance when he showed up was just a testament to his lack of life skills. Unsurprisingly, he couldn't maintain his job as a salesperson, and unable to cook, he constantly ate junk food, and his health deteriorated, leading to his dismissal a few months later, as I heard from his sister who worked at the same company. With no good job prospects and unable to land a stable position, he found himself in a dire situation. However, he needed to get my life back on track. A few months later, I heard from Kenneth's sister that she saw him working as a traffic control, looking unwell on a road he had passed during a business trip. After all this condescending and selfish behavior, it seems Kenneth ended up continuing with a job that allowed him no freedom. The mistress's parents were furious about her having an affair with a married man and indulging in luxuries. All the shopping and travel she had enjoyed are now forbidden, and under her parents' strict supervision, she has to go to work. She is forced to live a suffocating life, with no freedom in her job or personal life, carrying daily stress as she works. After that, I used my savings to move to a new condo quickly. The current condo also had memories of living with Kenneth, and just being there brought back unpleasant memories. I wanted to leave that place as soon as possible. My workload has continued to increase, and I have been able to build a good track record while gaining trust from several clients. I'm living a fulfilling single life, focused on my work. With a fresh start, I began a new life. A few months later, I started dating a man I met at a cafe in my new town. He works in corporate planning at a major company and has shown great interest and respect for my job as a web designer. I was attracted to his calm, logical, and composed nature. I'm sure he would never blatantly cheat or brazenly betray his family. Years later, I married him, and we were also blessed with children. This time, no complications arose, and the baby in my belly is growing healthily. My new husband has been very caring during my pregnancy, which has greatly helped. Now we are both eagerly awaiting the birth of our child as we continue working and preparing. A kind husband and another family member who will soon be born, a peaceful,